A great modern city may seem at first sight a poor habitat for birds and other animals. Yet its heart, which may be a veritable concrete desert, can still be a home for some creatures. One of the scavengers dependent on the scraps of food left about by man is the feral pigeon, which nests on the man-made cliffs provided by buildings, bridges and church towers. It's descended from the wild rock dove of the sea cliffs. The male bird has a distinct cooing display to the hen, in which he raises his head and bows deeply. Both male and female pigeon often converse together at the nest. The hen feral pigeon has a gruff coo, a little like that of the stock dove that you can hear on the Woodland Birds disc, also in the Wildlife series. The young pigeon, or squab, has a much higher pitched note than that of the adult. Here both are calling at the nest with a certain amount of wing flapping. Another scavenger in the city is the house sparrow, which takes bread, seed and insect food if this is available. There seems to have been a decline in numbers in recent years, however. Sparrows often sit about buildings, railway stations, docks and markets, and just call to each other for quite long periods. Even in quite densely built-up areas, the loud chirp of the house sparrow is often a common sound. I've sometimes watched the strange sparrow display flights, in which several males pursue a female, and when they catch up with her, hop around with wings at the droop and the tail fanned out, calling loudly. Sparrows and feral pigeons share their city habitat with smaller numbers of starlings. These birds prefer parklands and grass in the daytime, but at night many thousands come into the heart of London, Glasgow, Belfast, Birmingham, Manchester, Bristol, Newcastle and other cities to roost. Here are some starlings assembling at dusk on the Admiralty building near Horse Guards Parade in London. The starlings seek out ledges on the cliff-like faces of office blocks, arches and churches to spend the night, whistling and chattering above the roar of the traffic. The kestrel, which often feeds on sparrows, will nest on high chimneys, churches, and buildings like the Langham and the Savoy Hotel in London, Westminster Abbey and the Houses of Parliament. I've often heard its shrill chatter high above the city centre. The fauna of the wholly built-up areas isn't very large, but there are often such adaptable animals as brown rats, which live in the sewers, around the docks and riverbanks. Mice are more widely distributed than rats, and the house mouse's chatter can be heard in the very centre of cities. Among other undesirable associates of man are bluebottles and houseflies. The bluebottles are scavengers like most other city animals and are also carriers of disease bacteria. Many cities have squares and parks, which provide islands of vegetation inside the built-up area, although few are as well off in this respect as London. In these green oases, more birds are to be found than in the city's heart. Here by the statue of Peter Pan in London's Kensington Gardens is an April dawn chorus of great tit, carrion crow, song thrush and blackbird. In many city squares and parks, the blackbird can be heard singing his fluent phrases. This is a woodland bird that only recently has penetrated towns. The closely related mistle thrush has increased in town parks in many places in the last few years. Sometimes you can hear one at close range giving his sub-song, a quieter version of the full territorial song. The blue tit and wood pigeon in the background can also be found in many town parks. The full song of the mistle thrush is a wild one, coming down from the canopy of some tall elm or plane tree. And here's a starling giving his imitation of the bird that you've just heard. Several kinds of woodland bird besides the blackbird, song and missel thrushes can be found in the habitat of town park and square. These include crows, robins, chaffinches, wrens and sometimes jays. Hedge sparrows often keep close to the shrubberies from which their display notes can be heard in March. Blue tits nest in the holes of trees, as well as in street lamps, drain pipes and letterboxes. Some small towns may also have stock doves and rooks building in the trees which provide the blue tits with their homes. In the less disturbed squares and parks, the scarcer great tit may also breed. Tawny owls can live in many town parks, and they'll also visit squares where they don't in fact breed. Here's one calling above the traffic while a dog barks and a second owl hoots in the distance. Many town parks have ornamental waters and lakes. In winter, these are often visited by large numbers of black-headed gulls, which may also scavenge around city offices and railway sidings. Mallard duck nest on many park lakes, as well as on window boxes, roof gardens and river barges and bridges. Mute swans grace many town waters, like this hissing cob with a fine flotilla of piping cygnets. In these partly built-up areas, the wild mammals are few, but there are often naturalized grey squirrels from North America which take a heavy toll of young birds and plant shoots. Their strange chatters and whines can sometimes be heard high up in the canopy of a tall tree. hedgehog can still be found in some of London's royal parks, and at night its sniffing, trundling little figure may be overlooked. Moths and butterflies often flit along the flower borders in the parks. The common field grasshopper occurs in at least 2 of London's central parks, and its short chirp can be heard in Kensington Gardens. Lying between the wholly built-up areas and the more open country and suburban districts is a transitional zone, that of the inner suburbs and gardens. Here many woodland bird species, including those of towns and town parks, have been able to adapt themselves, but some, like the warblers and woodpeckers, find it a rather uncongenial zone. In this inner area, the blackbird is often the 3rd commonest bird, singing its notes against a chorus of sparrows and other blackbirds. I live in one of these inner suburbs, Dollis Hill in northwest London. One spring I recorded a male blackbird singing his quiet, rambling sub-song on the ground in my front garden. It's a soft, sometimes continuous, sometimes halting performance, with a greater pitch range than the normal song. The starling is my 2nd commonest bird, with some 250 pairs nesting within half a mile of my house. This starling is singing and rattling his bill on a chimney pot on my house. Listen, too, for the imitation. Carrion crows and other park birds, with goldfinches and greenfinches, will all nest in the inner suburbs. Sometimes there are more unusual visitors, like the male siskin, which came daily to my garden one winter for nearly 4 months. In March he began to sing, and here is one of his trial bursts given as he fed on seeds on my bird table. The house sparrow is usually the commonest bird in the inner suburbs. Many sit around in the gardens during the short winter days. Sometimes the sparrows establish roosts in plane trees, hawthorn bushes, and the creepers on houses. I regularly have a roost of about 60 birds in a Philadelphus in my garden. Other bird species may breed in small numbers or come as occasional visitors: jay, magpie, various gulls and so on. In winter, common gulls may forage over the gardens for scraps or chase the black-headed gulls and so force them to give up their own morsels of food. Swifts will breed if they can gain access to roofs for nesting. Every year in July I can hear the wild screams and the rush of wings as swifts hurtle low over the rooftops in their aerial chases. The young swifts are very noisy in late July and August, calling persistently from the darkness of their rooftop homes. When the winter weather is severe, birds may be on the move. Redwings and fieldfares may come to visit gardens for hips and haws. White-fronted geese sometimes fly over the partly built-up areas in the inner suburbs. The gardens of these suburbs, with their trees, lawns, hedges and herbaceous borders, are rich in insect life. Butterflies and moths aren't uncommon. In autumn I often have painted ladies and red admirals under my apple trees. One interesting visitor to the roses is the leaf-cutting bee, which with mechanical precision cuts out neat, smooth-edged pieces from the leaves and petals of roses to form the walls of its cells. Here's a bee flying round one of my Frau Karl Druski roses and setting to work with its jaws. Honeybees may be kept in the gardens, and these can be seen foraging among the flowers of privet, snowberry, lime, tree of heaven and other plants. The gentle buzz from an undisturbed hive is one of the pleasantest sounds of summer. A common high-flying visitor to my garden is the large red-tailed humblebee, which zooms in and out looking for food. Dead tree stumps, rockeries and old walls are often prospected by queen wasps looking for an underground site for a new colony. In autumn, as the weather gets colder, a fertile queen begins to look for a safe place indoors to hibernate. Many suburban gardens have small weedy pools where Anopheles mosquito larvae flourish and then reach whining maturity. Another kind of mosquito is a gnat culex, which is widespread in the London area. The last of the insects is the house cricket, an alien that lives in warm bakehouses, zoo cages, central heating plants and rubbish dumps where artificial heat is being generated. On very warm summer days, I sometimes hear these sounds of stridulating house crickets near my home.